All right. Hello, everybody. All right. Hello, everybody. We're here today with Stephanie Ramlogan, who is my very good friend. A lot of you all might already be familiar with Stephanie and may have read her writings. She is a blogger, very well known in Trinidad and the Caribbean diaspora. She writes for No More Fashion Victims. She's also an MFA candidate, which she'll be beginning very soon in creative writing. She is from Trinidad, born and bred, went to UE with me as well, and then moved to the States where she's been for a while, based in New York. And today we will be reviewing 1 Year of Ugly by Caroline Mackenzie, also another Trinidadian like us, and an author, and a very exciting book because it's recently been, the rights have been bought by Netflix for them to do a series on it. So it's very exciting for us Trinis. Stephanie, what are your thoughts on it? How did you end up reading 1 Year of Ugly? How did you come across it?
Hi, Sims. Well, thanks for having me on your podcast. I'm very excited to be the first. So I'm part of a book club called Book of Sins Book Club.
Mm-hmm.
And Cindy Allman, who leads the book club, focuses a lot on Caribbean writers, women of color, Caribbean heritage writers. So this was one of the books for 2020 that we had to read over the summer. So I might be a little rusty, but I do remember. It stood out a lot in my mind, so I do remember a lot. So I read it. I guess it might have been like in June or July last year from the book list.
Okay, and what were your initial thoughts? Did you read it before or after Netflix bought the rights for it? Did you know that Netflix bought the rights when you started to read it, or?
Yeah, I don't think I knew about the Netflix deal until maybe I was already reading it. Because first of all, I need to say, I listened to the audio version.
Okay.
And I think that impacted my opinion of it very, very much. So throughout, because it was narrated in an American voice, like an American accent.
Yeah, the day I listened to audibles of Yes Nightfall, and it was narrated in a thick Indian accent, and it threw off a lot of the local languages and slang.
It immediately I was biased because I know they chose this person because they seem to have some sort of like Hispanic influence, so that they could pronounce the Spanish language pretty well in the dialogue, but they couldn't do the Trini. And I'm just like, there's so many Trini Venezuelans that could have done this.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I forget what I was telling you, but
you asked.
My initial thought. Yeah. I didn't do it.
I started reading. I knew about it because I saw an interview that I think it was the Express did, or either Express or Newsday, I can't remember. I saw it on Facebook. They did an interview with her talking about it. That Netflix had bought the rights. So I was like, oh, I have to read this at some point. And then I somehow forgot about it. And then I went on to read, as I was telling you in one of our conversations, I read Dominicana by Angie Cruz, which I absolutely love. And after I read it on my Kindle. They suggested this, and I was like, this is a book that by the Trini author. Let me get on to reading it. So I started it on that premise. My initial thoughts on it when I started it were, well, first of all, I really went into it wanting to love the book because I read up a bit on the author before. As I said, I read her interview as well. And we have a lot of similarities in terms of background. So we both have a BA in French and Spanish. And then she went on to study translation at Imperial College here in London. I studied translation and MA in translation and interpreting as well here in London, but in the University of Westminster. Yes, I'm based in London. I should have probably said that at the beginning. I keep saying here in London. So I thought we have a lot of background together. I've also worked with some Venezuelans in Trinidad before, because there was a brief stint between Colombia and England when I was back in Trinidad, as you would know, Steph. And I did some work with them, helping a few translations here and there, but mainly teaching English, because that's what I was doing back then. I keep changing my paths in life. So So I went in really excited about the book. And one thing, well, there are some positives that I took about it, that I enjoyed about it, and then there's some things I think she could have worked a bit on. So positively speaking, I think towards the end of the book, Yola, who is the protagonist, so that just to give you a summary of the book to begin with, it's about this immigrant family that comes from Venezuela, and we get the impression that this family has been in Trinidad for a while. So it's not the new wave that is coming right now. She even says in her author's notes that this is based in 2016. And even when it's based, we get the impression that the Palacios family, they've been settled in Trinidad for a while. And they have an extended family, like most Venezuelan families that are in Trinidad. So we have the main nuclear family. So Yola, she's the protagonist, and she has her mom, her dad, her sister, and then they have some aunts and some cousins and so on. And one of the aunts passes, but she had a shady deal with a gangster in Trinidad, who was involved in human trafficking. So, well, not human trafficking, but bringing illegal people, yeah, human trafficking across into Trinidad from Venezuela. So they end up having to pay the aunt's debt. And in doing that, they have to actually house the refugees or when they come into Trinidad before they are set up elsewhere in Trinidad. So that is the background of the story. And then, so we hear the story from Yola's point of view. And Stephanie, what did you think of that? I know you do a lot of work on the other and so on. So did that strike you as strange that Mackenzie chose to write from Yola's point of view, being Trinidadian and Yola being a Venezuelan?
I mean, so the thing is, context is so important. So this book came out after American Dirt. I think she might have already been editing, been publishing when American Dirt, the controversy came out. And I do know, because I had seen an interview with the author where, she was asked about American Dirt, and, because that was written by an American person in the voice of a Mexican immigrant.
Okay.
So, there was that comparison there because American Dirt was like dragged and criticized for that. Okay. So, she was asked about it. And in her defense, she spoke about working together with refugees, translating for them, having conversations with them, so that she felt like she understood them well enough to lend a voice to them in a narration. Now, I'm a little on the fence about how I feel about it. Do I think that authors need to only write in their gender, sexuality, ethnicity? No, I don't think so. But I do think if you are going to assume the character of a, let's just say, minority, for lack of a better word, for someone who may be marginalized, for someone who may be misunderstood, for someone who is discriminated against, I think you need to be so solid in your representation and not leave any room for stereotypes to infiltrate. You have to be so authentic in that voice, not to perpetuate whatever ills are already being thrown at these people. And I'm not sure, or I am sure, that Caroline Mackenzie did not accomplish, for me, a fair impression of the Venezuelan families.
Yeah, I must say I was a bit surprised when I started reading it and I realized that the protagonist was Venezuelan. Not, well, because of everything you're saying, but also because I also studied translation like Mackenzie. When we study translation, you always are taught to translate into your mother tongue because of the nuances of language and so on. So you almost always translate and interpret into your mother tongue, unless, of course, you probably live, like, let's say, years and years and establish a life in the country, or if it's something very technical. But generally, especially when it comes to literary translation, you always do your mother tongue. Now, I would say that I know she studied technical translation, so that is probably different. I haven't specialized in technical translation. But I felt that for someone who would have studied translation and have this knowledge and be fluent in different languages, because she also did her BA in French and Spanish, she would understand the nuances of different languages, because she's not only adopting the voice of the other, the voice of these refugees, but it's a different language entirely from the language that she speaks. Her mother tongue is English. So at times I felt like that kind of shone through in the plot, that it wasn't her native language. Yes, she peppers it well with some Spanish phrases and little words here and there. But like, for example, there's a part in the plot where Aunt Milagros, even the fact that this is Aunt Milagros and not Tia Milagros or Tia Celia, it's kind of leaves me wondering. So there's a part when Aunt Milagros, she says that she's talking about the illegals, which is another point we'll touch upon. But the illegals are what they keep referring to the refugees throughout the book as. So she's complaining about the illegals that are currently staying in her house. And the Palacio father, he goes not in front of the Trini because there is Sancho's girlfriend who is present. And I don't know, at that point, it left me questioning. So was this conversation taking place in English, or which would be strange, because if I'm Venezuelan, my family's Venezuelan, I won't really be conversing with them in English. And if it is taking place in Spanish, then I felt like we needed to be told, the reader needed to be told before, that Megan, who is always portrayed as a Trinidadian, was fluent or understood Spanish or so on, where that was never the issue. So it was kind of, so that is like one of the parts where you're not too sure what language you're speaking, and you're kind of unsure about the authenticity of adopting this Venezuelan voice.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Yes, the word you use really appropriately. It was peppered. The language was peppered throughout.
Yeah.
So this was, I think, one of my grievances with the book. Like you're rightfully saying, you're wondering what language you're speaking. You know, they're really assimilated into Trinidadian culture. I think it needed to be said that they were assimilated into a very, I keep saying West washed. That's what I had said in the book club meeting. It's like Northwest Trinidad, like in Port of Spain, in certain very rich, very white neighborhoods. You know, it's not, all of Trinidad doesn't look like that. All of Trinidad doesn't sound like that. The impression of the rest of Trinidad from those places is different from how it might be from another place. And the perspective of this family in Trinidad was from the northwest of Trinidad.
Yeah.
So my issue was, like, I didn't feel like this was a Venezuelan family. And when I had said that before, people were like, oh, because they're assuming that I have a very specific impression that Venezuelans should be needy, or they need to be, you know, a sad story or a sob story, and they can't be like that. And that's not what I mean. Exactly what you were saying, like, what language are they speaking in the house? You know, Christmas time was such a great opportunity in the book. They had like this whole Christmas spread, and I was expecting to see more of the Venezuelan traditions come out in, you know, a holiday, like a family holiday. Like, this is an opportunity for you to teach us something about the customs, the traditions. Well, how is Christmas spent in Venezuela? Is it even a Venezuelan thing? I thought that was a missed opportunity. I don't feel like this, like you said, it is clear that she is not the author is not a native Venezuelan.
Yeah, so as you touched on the Christmas scene, I remembered it as well. So I know she does make some attempts at some points where she says, well, pastels, as they're known as hallacas in Venezuela, and she talks about the pan de jamon and so on. But like you, I felt like that is just kind of put in here and there.
It's kind of like what a Trini would know about Venezuela. I want to know what a Venezuelan would know about Venezuela.
Yeah. Another question for me was that, as you said, that you got the impression that they were living in north of Trinidad in a very kind of white culture, well, Trini white, as we would say. They even talk about complexions a lot when they're on Arapita Avenue, and she says, you know, a Trini white from a foreign white by the freckles on their shoulder, which I never even knew, to be honest. So,
White people know things.
so that's something I learned. But I felt that the stories, because when she talks about the Palacios family, she says the father, he works taxi, so he drops children to school and picks them back up. The mom seems to be an esthetician because she does nails and she does waxing in an annex of the house. The daughter works in a spa, and the narrator, she is a freelance translator. So fair enough. Fair enough, all of those professions, but then the lifestyle that they live, where they're able to be drinking prosecco or getting drunk. I think she even says champagne. She carries them for expensive dinner, and she comes back drunk on champagne. Now, for somebody who has her BA in French and Spanish, I'm assuming that Mackenzie would know the difference between champagne and sparkling wine. I don't even know, like, you know, to get drunk off of champagne, unless you have very low tolerance, you would be needing to spend a lot of money at a restaurant, because it's not just prosecco, which in itself is quite pricey in Trinidad for the average Trinidadian. So I felt that unless they really splurge, or unless translation is paying much better in Trinidad than it is here in London, the storyline wasn't always too convincing in terms of that. So those were like a little few points. Also, a point that I felt like we could have gotten more of a development of the Ronan character, who is the good guy, bad guy. We're not too sure if he's good or if he's bad. In the end, he comes out. I don't want to do any spoilers in case whoever's listening is going to read the book. But I would have liked to have his story developed, because I'm glad that she did include him, that he's working for Ugly, because a lot of times these refugees, they're in their predicaments because the people from their own country are also working to the trafficking of these people, and so on. So I like that she put Ronan in, and Ronan was working for Ugly. I think probably I don't want to say the pessimist in me, but if I had written the book, which I obviously didn't, I would have probably left Ronan as a bad character, without any redeeming qualities, because I felt it would be more real, because there really are idiots out there. But you know, people like happy endings, so
yeah. I agree with you. I think for small details, like what you were mentioning before, the champagne and so on, the fiction is not convincing.
Yeah.
Right. But at the same time, like Ronan was his name. I can't remember Ronan. I just remember him as the man. So this book is meant to be comedic, right? Which I found out after I read it, because I did not. Me personally, I didn't find it funny. Everyone else that I spoke to found it hilarious. Again, I'm going to chalk that up to the fact that I listened to the audiobook by a very unsuitable narrator.
Yeah.
So like even this character that you're discussing, Ronan, I mean, it's very hard to discuss this without the spoilers, but I wonder how much of this is just designed to play into a comedic plot, and how much of it is to resemble a telenovela. And, you know, because that's what people like in it too, is a telenovela, which is supposed to have, you know, it's supposed to be audacious. It's supposed to be ridiculous. It's supposed to be unrealistic. And when you look at it that way and you take it for what it is, yes, I think, you know, for people who enjoy that kind of entertainment, this was spot on.
I love telenovelas, but that's one of them. I do love telenovelas, and they are outlandish and outrageous, and they are not realistic at all. Yes.
So I don't know if I'm being too hard on the book sometimes, but in my own defense, even if this was framed as a comedy, even if this was how it was presented to us, I think you have to read the room. I think you have to be sensitive to the times that we are in. There is a refugee crisis, and Trinidad, you know, there are thousands of Venezuelan refugees coming to Trinidad, facing a lot of hardships in, you know, becoming, legally, basically doing this transfer legally, what their rights are, how they're treated in the streets, how they're treated when they need to rent a place, get a job. Like there's a lot of very, very heavy content. I understand the temptation to want to make light of it. I think no, is not the time.
Yeah.
And they say like too soon. I think it's too soon. And even again, even within a comedic setting, I feel like I would have appreciated a little bit more. Authenticity is the word we keep going back to. I feel like if the narrative, the protagonist is Venezuelan, if this is based around a Venezuelan family, I want to know more about Venezuelan culture.
Yeah. Yeah. Just another thing, we're talking about the Venezuelan and the whole crisis coming to Trinidad and so on. What she mentions in her author's notes is that how she got the idea of the book was because, as we mentioned before, she's a translator and she was getting more and more documents to translate. And so she recognized the plight, and then she was disgusted by a lot of the xenophobia that she was hearing in Trinidad. Like me, when you read Trinidadian news and so on, some of the comments as well, and how myopic the point of view. I completely agree with her on all of those points. So I don't know if when Yola is describing because Yola uses a lot of sexual innuendos in her description of the other females, the other Venezuelan females. So you'll see like the ass was jiggling and boobs and everything like that. She uses a lot of sexual adjectives when she's describing the girls. So I don't know if she was trying to adopt in that sense, which leads me back to find, I'm not too sure where Yola fits, because if Yola is a Trinidadian, and even though I know she's not, if she were a Trinidadian and she was saying that, I would say, okay, so Mackenzie is probably trying to show that that's the way we see them. We just see them as a sexual.
Yeah, actually, that's a good point. If Yola were Trinidadian, I think I would think very differently of the book.
Yeah, so she's just seeing these women. But the fact that Yola is Venezuelan, it makes me think, okay, so I think she's using Yola. I'm not sure, I'm not Mackenzie, but I think she tries to use Yola to portray the way the average Trinidad sees these the Venezuelan woman as just there for sexual pleasure. However, because Yola is also Venezuelan, you kind of, it's not as
appropriate.
Yeah, it's not as clear as it would be if Yola were a Trinidadian talking, because she's Venezuelan. It doesn't come across as clearly. And then one thing I was not too convinced about, happy about, was when she describes the dancers, or the dancers. So the dancers obviously are exotic dancers, but they're described as like being professional and wanting to dance in the strip clubs. So perhaps there are some Venezuelan women who come across to Trinidad and are professional strippers and strip for the joy of stripping, and they like to be Googled at and so on. Perhaps, I don't know. But I also think it's a bit dangerous to put that idea out, because it's the perception that a lot of Trinis have that these women just come in to steal our man, and they're just sluts and whatever, they're hoops, etc. Whereas, I mean, I know for a fact that there are Venezuelan women who come. We know, I know of cases of women who have been raped because of that stigma attached to them, who was forced. I had one of my students when I was working was forced to work in these kind of places because the person had her passport, basically. So perhaps, I'm not denying, maybe there are some that enjoy stripping, but I think she should have also mentioned the people who really, they come across and they do it because they really have no choice. And that is something that could have, but I mean, probably that's not her story. That's not what she wanted to talk about.
No, but you're right. I don't know, because the word I just don't think is appropriate. I'm not sure if it was appropriate for Caroline to write through Yola. I don't know if it's appropriate for Yola to be the eyes and voice of the Trinidadian people and their perception of Venezuelans. Like you said as well, it is a little bit dangerous to emphasize these stereotypes, even if it isn't just, even if it is for the laugh, even if it is for the familiarity, even if it is just to highlight the negative ways. Because I'm wondering if her intention was to show how ridiculous and mean we are as Trinidadians who discriminate against Venezuelans, particularly women, for these things, like over sexualizing them. Like the women in the book are hypersexualized.
Yeah.
And again, I don't remember all the nitty-gritty details. These are the things that stood out to me. But yes, I don't get the sense that there are engineers and teachers and lawyers among these women.
Yeah.
And every Venezuelan refugee that I have met has been a very highly educated professional, made to come to Trinidad to seek a better life and work in very, lower grade jobs.
Yeah.
And, they're hard workers. They are not all voluptuous, sexy mamacitas who come in here to get pregnant. They are not.
Yeah.
And from this book, I don't get that impression. I keep wondering what, like the Venezuelan women that I know who had to migrate to Trinidad and some of them have moved on to another country. I wonder what they would think about a book like this. But it's to the point where I wouldn't even recommend this book to them because I'm a little bit embarrassed, to say like somebody wrote this. But that being said, I do also know Venezuelan women who come to Trinidad and are very, very, very sexy and are, capitalizing on their bodies to, for popularity, to be Instagram influencers, to model, to, whatever. I'm not sure if from the book we get a whole picture.
Yeah.
And then I'm not sure if we were meant to.
Yeah. I agree. Now, one thing I think I must commend Mackenzie towards the end of the book. Well, I found it picked up tremendously from the big night in the nightclub when they have this big night. So once again, I don't want to give any spoilers, but there's a part towards the end where we have Yola. We get to see how Yola is thinking. And Yola goes on about the plight of the refugee because they now are faced with, do they stay in Trinidad, which would be dangerous for them because they are involved with this gangster whose name is Ugly, or do they now have to move on to a different country? Moving back to Venezuela is not an option because of what's happened in the crisis in Venezuela. And, you kind of see her debating, well, even if we do move on, yeah, we'll be free of Ugly, but we will once again not be welcome. Nobody wants refugees. Also, we would be vulnerable to another gangster, another person like Ugly again, taking advantage of us because we might be illegal. Even if we don't want to be illegal and we have to get paperwork, that is a whole process in itself. And you're not even sure if you're going to get the paperwork and then the jobs you have to start a whole thing. So I think that part of the book she does excellent, where she really shows the plight of a refugee, despite where you're coming from. And it's really well done. It's a pity that it's so far towards the end. I would have liked to see it a little earlier, but I think she does. At that point in the book, I can see, yes, she has spoken to refugees, she understands and so on. So I liked that part of the book, I must say. I really like that part. I even underlined a few parts of it in my vision.
No, I agree. I think what she did really well, which was useful, because what's as important in the book is like what is actually useful. I don't think I thought I understood before how the process works, how immigrants get here, other than the traditional ways like taking a flight, and what the process is. How do they, like, we hear the word human trafficking, but do we really understand what that means? They have people that they pay off, how that arrangement works, the fact that like you might find yourself in a situation where you have to house other immigrants until they get sorted, what the passport situation might look like that sort of insights was very useful.
Yeah.
And I do commend her for maybe researching that and sharing that with us, so that, that I think was really good in the book to sensitize us a bit to what the experience is that they go through. Because I think in Trinidad, we have this impression that they pull up on a boat and then they just go movie town and start to lime. And that is not the case, because I hear people saying all the time, like, as our borders are locked, oh, just go to Venezuela and jump a boat and get to Trinidad. Like, it's no big deal. And I'm just like, I really don't think it is that simple.
Yeah.
So I like that she
Also
highlighted the
has
process.
strong, I think, like, I like the strength of Aunt Celia, even though
Mm-hmm.
she kind of comes across as, I think she's supposed to come across as a bitch, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
But she's a very strong character. She
Mm-hmm.
stands up for what she believes in, and
Mm-hmm.
she takes good care of her children, even if it's
Mm-hmm.
having to get involved in a shady deal with a gangster. She makes sure she's certain that her children get into a good school and so on, and she leaves this kind of manuscript for Yola to live her life authentically. And when I was reading up a bit on the author, I read that how she lost her mom, unfortunately, a few years ago. Well, a decade ago, I think she says. And her mom was also very artistic. And
Mm-hmm.
however, because she had to try and get the family to continue living day to day, she worked a 9 to 5, and she wasn't able to explore her artistic abilities. So she decided that she would not do that. She would always try and live to write and to translate and all the other things she may be involved in. So I felt that Yola and Aunt Celia probably was somewhat of a reflection of her relationship with her
Right.
mom. And
Mm-hmm.
Aunt Celia, even though Aunt Celia is not physically present in the book, because Aunt Celia is dead when the book starts,
Mm-hmm.
we still get the strength of her, and we see that Yola gets a lot of strength from her day to day and from the manuscript and reading. And then and she's a strong character. She's not always a likable character, but I don't think we are supposed to like her. I think
Mm-hmm.
the point of Aunt Celia is that, I'm going to do me, whether you like it or not, and I'm going to get
Mm-hmm.
ahead in life, and I'm going to get my children to get ahead in life. And to be honest, as a refugee, I think a lot of times you probably have to be like that
Of course.
to try and just get you and your family ahead in life. So I think Aunt Celia and Yola, to an extent, were very strong female characters, which is always good
Mm-hmm.
because telenovelas, I look at all of them, as you see my rants and telenovelas, they often lack strong female characters. So if she was going for
Mhm.
a telenovela vibe, then I'm glad that she broke away from that, oh, poor me damsel in distress. And she
Mhm.
had strong female characters who could get their act together and move on. So I like that about the book. I must say, I found like the book picked up pace after a while. It was hard to get into, but once the action started, it kind of picked up pace. And I guess that's why Netflix, I mean, if Netflix bought the rights, they must have seen.
No, it's definitely made for TV. Like, it would be very good TV.
Yeah. So it's interesting to see what Netflix does for it. But unfortunately, I saw in one of her interviews, Netflix, when they buy the rights for a show, they don't have to produce it anytime soon. They could
No, it could be whenever. Yeah.
so I don't
Maybe
know.
we'll see, or maybe we won't. But I think it'll definitely be made for TV. I actually thought the pace of the book to be quite good throughout. Even though I was just like stripsing for plenty of it, I was like, I was engaged. I thought the storyline was gripping. I thought a lot happened. It was very easy to follow. It was very easily digestible. It was an easy read. It was entertainment. If you maybe because of my background, I'm too invested in the life of immigrants and refugees,
I
and
think
particularly Spanish speaking ones. So I don't know.
so. Out of 5 stars, Stephanie, how much would you give this book?
I'll give it a 2.5.
I'll give it a
If
3.
you have half stars, is that allowed?
Yeah, it is 2.5. Okay, I would give it a 3. I think it's an interest. I think Trinidadians should read it. I would encourage people to read it. It's always good to read local talent. Uh,
Absolutely. And I definitely would encourage people to read it for the discussion. I think it is definitely a great book to talk about.
Yep, definitely. I agree. And what have you recently read, Steph?
Well, I'm on this rampage to just try to read so many books so fast. So I've already read 3 books for the year. So I just finished August Town by Miller last night. And for who doesn't know, Miller is a Jamaican author, because I'm really trying to read mostly Caribbean authors. And August Town was fantastic, like 100 stars out of 5, like really, really well done. But I do recommend, if you are reading 1 Year of Ugly, follow up with Undocumented Americans, and then, like you mentioned, Dominicana, because like you said, they have similar themes. So it's nice to sort of compare the stories.
Yeah. I recently read Dominicana. I can't believe you actually have the one and only cruise. But I really enjoyed it, and that's the kind of theme I like. I like you. I like Caribbean writing. I like Latin American writing. I like immigrant stories. So those things are always books that appeal to me. So
yeah.
But no, I'm still on the search for a new book, so probably I would read your recommendation.
Oh my gosh, read August Town, you crazy?
Yeah.
On The Mermaid of Black, well, I say conch, because in Trinidad we say conch, but they call it black conch. Have you read The Mermaid of Black Conch?
No, but I saw you raving about it on
Everywhere, and she just won the Costa Award for Best Novel.
Okay,
So yeah, so I highly recommend it as well. And she's a Trinidadian author as well, living in London. I think London, at least in the UK, but I think London.
It won a lot of awards actually. I'm on a Facebook group of Trinidadians living in the UK, and somebody recently posted it, and when I looked up on it, it ran a lot of awards.
It's like magical realism done at its best.
Okay.
At its absolute best. It is so convincing. It is so like oh my God, you will become immersed in this world, which is an unnamed island, but it's Trinidad. When you hear the food and the accent and whatever, it's Trinidad. And a mermaid is captured, and it's fantastic.
Okay, I'll definitely check it out. So that's it for today. Thank you, everybody who has stayed with us for so long. And hopefully you join me again on my next podcast. Thank you very much, Steffi, for joining and for giving me so much of your time. I now realize how long this recording was. All right. Talk to you all soon. Bye. I'm trying to stop the recording, but I think my computer is paused. Anyway,
I see it's still recording going there.
Yeah, I'm clicking on stop and recording and it's not. But I could always cut it now that it's at the end and we did a proper ending.
Well, you wanna just stop it and then I'll call you on WhatsApp?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay.
Stephanie, just leave. My whole computer is completely right now.
Okay, bye.